Hi, this is a quick tutorial about how to set up a local Drupal 8 development environment using Vagrant, Virtualbox, and DrupalVM. You can follow along the notes here at my GitHub repo at kmall/DrupalVM-intro. You can find the full set of documentation for DrupalVM at docs.drupalvm.com. This is meant to just expand upon the quick setup guide and give you an idea of what it takes to set up the environment. The first thing you need to do is install the dependencies. You're going to need Virtualbox, Vagrant, Git, Ansible, and Drush. For Virtualbox and Vagrant, you just need to go to the download pages for each of those applications, install the package. For Git, a lot of times Git will come pre-installed when you install Xcode on a Mac. However, that's usually going to give you an older version of Git. To see how to update Git, I would recommend reading this article about how to keep Git updated and use Homebrew or another package manager to install Git. With Ansible, you can install Ansible with either the Python package manager or with Homebrew or any other package manager that you use that has access to install Ansible. For Drush, I like to use Composer. Composer is a cornerstone of using Drupal 8, and I find it just a lot easier to manage Drush and which versions of Drush that you're using. So you can follow the instructions here listed in this tutorial. I've marked down some of the steps here that you can follow to install Composer and then install Drush with Composer. So once you have those set up, I've already got these installed, so I'm not going to run through that process here. You can follow any of the links within the notes document, and they can give you a better explanation if you need more help installing that particular application. But as you can see here, I've got Composer installed. All right, I've got Drush installed. All right, and I've got Git installed. So now I can work on setting up my host environment to work with DrupalVM. The first thing that I need is two directories. I need a directory to house my virtual machine, and I need a directory to house the project's file system. So I'm going to create those in my home directory with this command here. I can just copy and paste that here. And I guess I've already made those. So you can see I get an empty directory here for sites. And I've got an empty directory here for virtual machines. So the next thing I'm going to do is go into my virtual machines directory, and I'm going to clone the repository for DrupalVM. So you can see I'm in my virtual machines folder. I'm cloning DrupalVM, and I can see that folder now here in my directory. The next thing I need to do is I need to use Ansible Galaxy to install the requirements that we need for DrupalVM. Essentially, what that's going to do is just download all of the Ansible roles that's going to configure the server for you. You don't need to know a whole lot about that entire process. You just need to make sure that you run this command so all the Ansible scripts are available to you. So you also need to run that from within your Drupal VM directory. Also, by using the --force, it's going to make sure that you have any latest version of any of the roles that have been updated. So while that goes through and does that, we're going to go and look at our next step here. All right, so the next thing that we need to do is configure our Drupal VM. Drupal VM comes out of the box with an example config YAML file, which is really going to control how your machine is set up. And it also comes with an example drush make file, which is going to determine how your Drupal instance is installed. So thankfully, we can just use the defaults for that. Currently, the defaults in DrupalVM are set to set up Drupal 8, as well as use PHP 5.6. And as soon as Ansible Galaxy is done downloading the roles, we can take a look at that config file. Alright, so now our Ansible Galaxy has finished updating, so now we can take a look at our config files. If we look at the directories here, we can see that we have the example.config.yaml and the example.drupal.make.yaml. So let's copy example config YAML over. Let's have a quick look at that. So this is going to set a couple of things that we'll need to set up our Drupal VM. It's going to download the Vagrant box. It's going to set up our host name as well as our IP address. It's going to set up our sync folders, as well as set a bunch of other configuration options that we can look into further later. But right now the default is set to use Drupal 8. Drupal major version here is Drupal 8, and we're going to set to install the site, and we're also going to build it from the make file that's within our directory. These are all the defaults, so there's nothing that we need to change here. So let's copy our Drupal make file over. Let's take a look at that. So this is set to install Drupal 8 core as well as the devel module. You can update this to install whatever modules you want, make it look however you need your Drupal make file to be. We're just going to leave it as default right here. So that's pretty much it for the configuration. You can go right out of the box with the default configurations. Next step is creating the VM. The only thing that we need to do is from within this directory, run Vagrant up. The first time you run this is going to take quite a bit of time. It's going to need to download that Vagrant box, as well as provision the server, download all the packages, and install all the packages it needs. So it's going to take some time. So we're going to get this going. You may have to add your administrative password in there for your NFS shares. If you've already done so within the terminal session, you might not need to. Let's just make sure that this gets going. There we go. So now it's going to download everything that we need for the operating system. All right, so now our Vagrant box is set up, and Ansible is going to take over and start running each of the roles, which is going to provision the server with all the software packages that we need to run Drupal 8. This again is going to take quite some time the first time you run it. If you need to re-provision the server for any reason after that, it'll be much quicker to run. Alright, and our script has finished, and our server has been provisioned, and Drupal has been installed. To check our installation, we can go to our project folder that we set up. We can see our Drupal VM directory is there. And our Drupal installation is here as well. The next thing we need to do is we need to set up our host file so our browser will point to the DrupalVM dev instance when we're trying to access our site. So to do that, we want to edit our host file. There we go. All right. So what we need to do here is just put an entry for that will point to our DrupalVM. Which by default it uses the 192.168.88.88 address. As long as you don't have any other VMs currently already running on that IP, there should be no conflicts. The default site name for your Drupal installation is just drupalvm.dev. In the config file, you can change that to whatever you want. For now, we just left the defaults. We also want to point this to our web interface for our database, which we'll see in a moment. All right, if we save that. Now when we point our browser to drupalvm.dev, it's going to hit our virtual machine that's set up and show us our Drupal site. Fantastic. If we want to check out our database, we can just go to adminer.drupalvm.dev. The password for the database is by default is just root, and the database name is Drupal. Also things that you can configure within the config.yaml file. We can see that we have all of our tables here for Drupal 8. And the next thing to do is to check that we can see our code base from our host machine. So I'm going to go to our sites folder. Which I was already in. Right, so we can see that our files are here on our host file system. The last thing we need to do is point our IDE to this folder, and then we can use the IDE or whatever text editor you like to use on your host machine to update your Drupal files. So I'm just going to add a PHP project here. Call it Drupal 8. And voila, I can see all of the files in my code base for Drupal. I can change them here, and it's going to be reflected on my VM host. The last thing I want to do is test my Drush access. So when this gets set up, it automatically uses Drush aliases for this. So the Drush alias is just the name that you access it through the URL. So we're going to use drupalvm.dev, and I can say status, and just want to add that. So essentially what this is going to do is it's going to SSH into the machine, and it's going to make the Drush command. So we can see that that's correct here, and I can clear my cache if I want, which happens often in Drupal development. And that's it. So from here on, we can do any of the development we need. We can download modules with Drush. You can update the makefile before you install Drupal, and it will download the modules that you needed. In part 2, we're going to go over setting up multiple sites within the same VM and go over a couple tweaks that might make it helpful, a little bit more useful for your development.